Now, prominent Al Jazeera journalist Anas al-Sharif has been killed in an Israeli strike in Gaza. The UN has criticised the attack as a grave breach of humanitarian law and launched an investigation. Mr al-Sharif was killed in a tent in northern Gaza alongside 4 colleagues. Al Jazeera described the attack as punishment for al-Sharif's extensive reporting from northern Gaza. Israel claimed he was the leader of a Hamas cell planning rocket attacks, something strongly denied by the Qatar-based news organisation. And in Doha, Al Jazeera staff have held a vigil for their colleagues. Also killed were the Al Jazeera correspondent Mohammed Kuraika, cameraman Ibrahim Zahir, Mohammed Nufal and Momen Aliwa. Israel has not said they were in any way connected to Hamas. Well, Jodie Ginsberg is CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists and gave her reaction to the killings.
We're absolutely devastated by this news. We warned in a statement several weeks ago that we were concerned for the safety of Anas al-Sharif after an Israeli defense spokesperson rehearsed claims without providing evidence that Anas was a terrorist. And of course, that's now come to pass. And not only has Anas been targeted, but 4 other journalists working for Al Jazeera killed in the same strike, and 2 other people as well. Journalists are considered civilians in any war setting and should not be targeted, and to target them deliberately is a war crime. We have not heard anything from Israel alleging that the other 4 journalists or the others in the tent had any kind of terrorist links, and it's hard to see at all what justification there would be for this kind of attack, including on Anas al-Sharif. We still yet to see any real credible evidence of Anas al-Sharif's terrorist links. And this is a pattern we've seen repeatedly from Israel.
Well, John Williams is the executive director of the Rory Peck Trust, founded in memory of the freelance cameraman Rory Peck, who was killed in Moscow in 1993. The organisation supports the safety and welfare of freelance journalists worldwide. Well, John Williams explained how significant these killings were.
The murder of 6 journalists in a single incident is one of the worst attacks on journalists ever. You know, if you remember Charlie Hebdo in Paris in whenever it was, 2008, or the attacks in Afghanistan when a number of journalists were killed in 2016, this ranks up with those attacks as being one of the worst incidents of attacks on journalists ever. You know, in November, we have the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. And there are currently international criminal court indictments against individuals. They need to be seen through and they need to be prosecuted, because killing and targeting journalists is a war crime. And if we just turn a blind eye to that, then what's to stop it happening next year or the year after? And all of my former colleagues in this newsroom will be vulnerable, because people can see that you can attack journalists and get away with it. And that is not a situation that we want anybody to be in.
Well, that was John Williams. Let's speak live to our correspondent Emir Nader, who's in Jerusalem for us. Emir, as I was saying there in the introduction, the UN has condemned this as a grave violation of international humanitarian law. So take us through the latest reaction there's been.
Well, we've seen reaction on the ground in Gaza with the funerals of the journalists, the streets thronged with crowds, the journalists' bodies being carried, really a testament to how well known these journalists were. Chief amongst them, Anas al-Sharif, who had millions of followers online. He was a household name, not only in Gaza, but also internationally, as perhaps the most prominent correspondent who remained in the Gaza Strip. And some of the reaction that is coming in is also reflecting the fact, with over 180 journalists who've been killed, Palestinian journalists who've been killed in Gaza since the beginning of the war, that the number of people who are there to communicate what's happening is dwindling. And obviously that team were based in Gaza City, which is the location where the Israeli military is now intending to invade in the coming months. So it's seen as a one less voice who can communicate what will be happening there. Now, we've had the evidence that's been presented as evidence by the Israeli military, spreadsheets appearing to show a payment of $200 to Anas al-Sharif at some point previous to the war. The Israeli military saying he's the head of a terrorist cell. The spreadsheet shared of unclear context, unclear provenance. We're not really sure the context or the backstory. What they don't seem to show They don't seem to substantiate that he was indeed an active member of Hamas, an active agent, operative during this current war, or indeed October the 7th. The BBC has been reporting, we do understand that at some point before the previous conflict, before the current conflict, he did do some work with a Hamas media office. But again, we aren't seeing any evidence being presented by the Israeli military since he was first accused by them almost a year ago of being a journalist posing as a terrorist posing as a journalist. There's been the space of almost a year where the Israeli military has been making that accusation against him, but only yesterday did we see him targeted and killed alongside his 5 colleagues, of whom there has also been no explanation by the Israeli military why they were killed as well. Now we're seeing all this outrage internationally as well. Questions asked, including by the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, who says he's gravely concerned by the repeated targeting of journalists by the Israeli military and has called for an investigation into the killings.
And we've had those sorts of calls before, and of course they have not happened with the Israelis themselves investigating incidents of this type in the past. You mentioned some of the graphics and the documentation that the IDF have put out. Is there pressure for all of that information and whatever intelligence to be published so it can be properly scrutinised?
We don't know what might be released in the coming days, whether the Israeli military, as they have said they have more documents that they haven't released, but we're being presented with the same material that was presented around a year ago, which doesn't, as we said, doesn't appear to substantiate that Anas al-Sharif and his team, or indeed just him, he was an active member of Hamas, an active terrorist. So there is huge skepticism in Gaza and amongst the journalist community about what's being presented, and there is the material that is being presented by the Israeli military isn't being seen by press freedom groups as being substantial, sufficient, or indeed convincing, or indeed enough to justify the killing of Anas al-Sharif and his colleagues.
Live for us there in Jerusalem. Thanks very much. Thank you.